The sound of my husband's hand hitting my face echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. 23 people sat frozen around the Thanksgiving table, their forks halfway to their mouths, gravy dripping back onto their plates. The sting on my cheek burned hot, but the silence that followed hurt even more. I touched my face where Thomas had struck me, feeling the heat radiating from my skin. His mother, Margaret, sat at the head of the table with her mouth hanging open, though I could see a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. His sister Patricia had stopped cutting her turkey and was staring at me like I deserved what just happened. Even the children had gone quiet, their usual Thanksgiving chatter replaced by an uncomfortable stillness that made my stomach twist. "Rebecca, you're embarrassing yourself," Thomas said, his voice cold and steady like nothing had happened. "Sit down and stop making a scene." But I couldn't sit down. My legs felt like jelly, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This wasn't the first time Thomas had raised his hand to me, but never in front of his family. Never in front of our daughter KATHRYN, who was sitting in her little chair with her tablet clutched against her chest, her big brown eyes wide with confusion and fear. The whole day had been building to this moment. From the second we walked through his parents' front door that morning, I knew it was going to be bad. Margaret had looked me up and down like I was wearing rags instead of the nice blue dress I'd bought specifically for today. "Oh, Rebecca," she'd said with that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted to cut me down. "I see you decided to come after all. I wasn't sure you'd show up since you've been so distant lately." Patricia had jumped right in, of course. "Mom's right, Rebecca. You've seemed really stressed. Are you taking care of yourself? You look tired." She'd said it with concern, but her eyes were mean. They always were when it came to me. I'd tried to brush it off, carrying the green bean casserole I'd made to the kitchen, while Thomas disappeared with his father and brother to watch football. That's when Margaret really started in on me. "This casserole looks different than usual," she'd said, poking at it with a spoon. "Did you change the recipe?" "Because the one you made last year was barely edible." "I used the same recipe as always," I'd replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Patricia had added, appearing beside her mother like they'd planned it. "Well, maybe you were distracted when you made it. Thomas mentioned you've been having some difficulties lately with your memory and such." That had been the first red flag. Thomas had been telling his family I was having memory problems. I wasn't having any memory problems. If anything, my memory had been getting sharper lately, picking up on all the little lies and inconsistencies in Thomas's stories about where he'd been and what he'd been doing. The attacks had continued all day. Comments about my job at the hospital, how I was never home and always working. Suggestions that maybe I was too stressed to be taking proper care of KATHRYN. Whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. By the time we sat down for dinner, I felt like I was drowning in their disapproval. The final straw had come when Margaret started talking about how important it was for children to have stable home environments, and how some mothers just weren't cut out for the responsibility. She'd been looking right at me when she said it, and I'd finally had enough. "Margaret, I think you need to stop," I'd said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm a good mother to KATHRYN, and I work hard to provide for my family. I don't deserve to be talked to like this in front of everyone." That's when Thomas had exploded. "Don't you dare speak to my mother that way," he'd snarled, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "You come into her house, bring your terrible food, and then have the nerve to be disrespectful?" "Thomas, I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just—" "You were just what? Making excuses like you always do?" His face had turned red, and I could see that vein in his forehead that always appeared when he was about to lose control. "You're pathetic, Rebecca. My whole family can see it." And that's when his hand had connected with my cheek. Now, standing there with my face burning and my heart breaking, I looked around the table at all these people who were supposed to be my family. Not one of them looked shocked by what Thomas had done. Not one of them stood up for me. But then I heard the soft sound of little feet on the hardwood floor. KATHRYN had climbed down from her chair and was walking toward me, her tablet held tight in her small hands. Her face was serious, more serious than any 7-year-old should ever have to be. She stopped right in front of Thomas, tilted her head up to look at him, and in a clear, steady voice that cut through the silence like a knife, She said 5 words that made my husband's face drain of all color. "Daddy, should I show everyone the videos?" Thomas went completely white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and his eyes darted from KATHRYN to her tablet and back again. The confident, angry man who had just slapped me in front of his entire family suddenly looked terrified. 3 months before that terrible Thanksgiving dinner, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. Thomas would kiss me goodbye every morning before heading to his construction job, tell me he loved me, and promise to be home by 6 for dinner with KATHRYN and me. He seemed like the perfect husband and father, always helping with homework, taking KATHRYN to the park on weekends, and bringing me flowers on random Tuesday afternoons. But fairy tales aren't real, and I should have known that. The first crack in our perfect life appeared on a Wednesday evening in August. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Thomas's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was in the shower, and normally I wouldn't even glance at his phone, but the message preview caught my eye because it was from someone named Crystal. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Handsome. Wear that blue shirt I like." My hand stopped moving, a pair of KATHRYN's tiny socks frozen halfway to the drawer. Thomas didn't own a blue shirt that I knew of, and I'd never heard him mention anyone named Crystal from work. When he came out of the bathroom with a towel around his waist, I asked him about it as casually as I could. "Oh, Crystal's just someone from the Henderson project," he'd said without missing a beat. "We're having a team meeting tomorrow night to go over the blueprints. Nothing exciting." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed the uncomfortable feeling down and went back to folding laundry. But the signs kept coming. Thomas started working late more often, sometimes not coming home until after KATHRYN was already asleep. When I'd ask about his day, his stories seemed rehearsed, like he'd practiced them in the car on the drive home. He'd mention coworkers I'd never heard of and projects that didn't quite make sense when I tried to piece them together. Then there were the phone calls. Thomas had always been the type to answer his phone right away, but suddenly he was letting calls go to voicemail and stepping outside to return them. "Work stuff," he'd say when I asked. "You know how boring construction talk can be?" The money was another red flag. We'd always shared our bank account, and I handled most of the bills since I was better with numbers. In September, I noticed cash withdrawals I couldn't account for. $200 here, $300 there. When I brought it up, Thomas got defensive. "I'm allowed to take money out of my own account, aren't I?" He'd snapped. "Maybe I wanted to surprise you with something nice, but now you've ruined it by being suspicious." I felt terrible for questioning him and apologized, but the withdrawals kept happening. What I didn't know was that while I was starting to doubt my own instincts, my 7-year-old daughter was accidentally building a case against her father. KATHRYN had gotten a tablet for her birthday in July, and she was obsessed with it. She loved taking pictures of everything. Our cat sleeping in the sunshine, the flowers in our garden, me making breakfast in the morning. She discovered the video function and would record herself singing songs or telling stories about her stuffed animals. The tablet had this feature where everything automatically saved to a cloud storage account, which I'd set up so her pictures and videos wouldn't get lost if something happened to the device. What I didn't realize was that KATHRYN was recording a lot more than just her playtime. She had a habit of leaving the tablet on the coffee table or kitchen counter, sometimes still recording, while she went to get a snack or use the bathroom. To her, it was just a toy that happened to be running. To anyone watching those videos later, it was a window into our family's real life. In one video from early September, you could hear Thomas on the phone in the background while KATHRYN played with her dolls. "No, Crystal, I told you I can't do Friday nights. That's family time." And Rebecca would get suspicious. "Saturday afternoon is better. I'll tell her I'm meeting the guys to watch the game." In another video from late September, Thomas was talking to someone on the phone in the kitchen, while KATHRYN recorded herself making a pretend cooking show in the living room. I know it's complicated, but I'm working on it. Rebecca doesn't suspect anything yet, and I need to keep it that way until I figure out the best way to handle this situation. There were dozens of these videos, all saved automatically to the cloud, all capturing conversations that Thomas thought no one else could hear. But the most damaging video was recorded in early October, just a few weeks before Thanksgiving. KATHRYN had left her tablet recording on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to brush her teeth before bed. Thomas was on the phone, pacing around the kitchen, and his voice was clearer than it had ever been on any of the other recordings. "Crystal, you have to understand. This isn't just about me anymore. I have a daughter to think about. Rebecca's been acting strange lately, asking too many questions. I think she might be having some kind of breakdown. My family's starting to notice it too. Maybe that's the angle we need to work? Show that she's not stable enough to take care of KATHRYN properly." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "No, I'm not going to just abandon my daughter. But if Rebecca's proven to be an unfit mother, then I'd have to step up and take full custody, wouldn't I? And then we could be together without all this sneaking around." While my husband was planning to destroy my life and take my daughter away from me, KATHRYN was upstairs brushing her teeth, completely unaware that her innocent little tablet was recording every word. October brought a chill that had nothing to do with the changing leaves outside our windows. Thomas had become a stranger living in my house, and I felt like I was slowly losing my mind trying to figure out what was happening to my marriage. The lies were getting bolder. Thomas would tell me he was going to Home Depot for work supplies, then come home 3 hours later with nothing to show for it. When I'd ask what took so long, he'd get irritated and say the store was crowded or he'd run into a coworker and lost track of time. But his clothes would smell like perfume, a sweet floral scent that definitely wasn't mine. I started paying closer attention to everything. The way he'd shower immediately when he got home from these mysterious errands, how he'd started keeping his phone face down on tables and taking it with him even when he went to the bathroom. The new cologne he'd bought for work meetings, even though he'd never cared about cologne before in the 8 years we'd been married. One evening in mid-October, I decided to drive by the Henderson construction site he'd been talking about so much. I told myself I was just being a supportive wife. Maybe I'd surprise him with coffee and see this big project he'd been working on. But when I got to the address he'd given me, there was nothing there but an empty lot with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for months. My hands shook as I sat in my car staring at that empty lot. Either Thomas was confused about the address, or he'd been lying to me for months about where he was spending his time. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. That night, I tried to bring it up casually. "How's the Henderson project going?" "I drove by there today and didn't see much activity." Thomas didn't even look up from his dinner. "Oh, we're working on the back section this week. You probably couldn't see it from the road." But I'd walked around that entire lot. There was no back section. There was no construction at all. The gaslighting started getting worse after that. When I'd mention things that didn't add up, Thomas would look at me with this concerned expression and say things like, "Rebecca, are you feeling okay? You seem really confused lately." Or, "Honey, I'm worried about you. You're forgetting conversations we've had." But I wasn't forgetting anything. If anything, I was remembering too much. Every inconsistency, every lie, every time his story changed from one telling to the next. The worst part was that his family started treating me differently too. When Margaret called to check on us, she'd ask pointed questions about how I was handling stress and whether I was getting enough sleep. Patricia would make comments about how difficult it must be for Thomas to deal with my mood swings. I realized Thomas had been talking to them about me, painting me as unstable and unreliable. He was building a narrative where I was the problem, and his family was buying into it completely. Meanwhile, KATHRYN continued her innocent documentation of our family life. She'd gotten into the habit of recording herself, having tea parties with her stuffed animals, setting up the tablet to capture her elaborate storylines about Princess Bear and Sir Bunny. What she didn't realize was that these recordings often caught much more than her imaginative play. In one video from late October, KATHRYN was having an animated conversation with her toys about planning a birthday party, but in the background, you could clearly hear Thomas on the phone in the next room. "Crystal, I know this is hard, but we have to be patient. I'm laying the groundwork with my family so they'll support me when the time comes. My mother already thinks Rebecca's having some kind of mental health crisis. My sister's been documenting all the weird things Rebecca's been doing lately." There was a pause while he listened. "No, she doesn't suspect about us specifically, but she's definitely suspicious about something. Yesterday she asked me about the Henderson project, and I could tell she'd been checking up on me. We need to be more careful." Another pause. "I've been thinking about that. Maybe it's time to take this to the next level. If I can show that Rebecca's paranoid and delusional, that she's making up stories about me cheating and lying, then I'll have grounds for divorce and full custody. My family would testify that she's been acting erratic. In the video, you can see KATHRYN pouring pretend tea for Princess Bear, completely absorbed in her game, while her father plots to destroy her mother's life just a few feet away. The most chilling part came at the end of that conversation. "Crystal, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about us being together. Rebecca's becoming a problem, and problems need to be solved. If she keeps digging and asking questions, she might figure out more than just our relationship. There are things about my business dealings that she can't know about. Things that could cause serious trouble for both of us." He lowered his voice even more. "I've been moving money around, setting things up so it looks like she's been making unauthorized withdrawals. My accountant friend is helping me create a paper trail that shows she's been acting irrationally with our finances. When the time comes, I'll have evidence that she's not just emotionally unstable, but financially irresponsible too." While Thomas was orchestrating my downfall, KATHRYN was teaching Princess Bear how to have proper table manners, her sweet voice narrating a world where the biggest problem was whether to serve imaginary cookies or imaginary cake first. She had no idea her tablet was recording the evidence that would eventually save both of us. The week before Thanksgiving felt like living in a house made of glass that was about to shatter. Every conversation with Thomas felt like walking through a minefield, and I could sense something big was coming, though I had no idea how devastating it would be. It started on Monday morning when I found papers scattered on Thomas's desk in our home office. He'd left for work early, and I was looking for our insurance information because KATHRYN had a doctor's appointment that afternoon. What I found instead made my blood run cold. There were legal documents with our lawyer's letterhead, but I'd never seen them before. Custody evaluation forms, financial disclosure statements, a document titled Petition for Emergency Custody, with my name listed as the respondent. The papers painted a picture of me that I barely recognized, an unstable woman who was neglecting her child and mismanaging family finances. According to these documents, I had been exhibiting erratic behavior and making unfounded accusations against my spouse. There were statements from witnesses, Thomas's family members, describing incidents where I supposedly acted irrationally or aggressively. Margaret had given a statement saying I'd screamed at her over the phone about imaginary problems. Patricia claimed I'd accused Thomas of having an affair with no evidence whatsoever. But the worst part was the financial section. Someone had documented a pattern of suspicious withdrawals and reckless spending that supposedly showed I was having some kind of mental breakdown. The irony was crushing. These were the same withdrawals I'd questioned Thomas about, but somehow they'd been twisted to make me look like the guilty party. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. Thomas had been planning this for months, building a case against me with the help of his family and apparently our lawyer too. He wasn't just having an affair, he was systematically destroying my reputation so he could take KATHRYN away from me. I quickly photographed every document with my phone, then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. I spent the rest of that day in a fog, going through the motions of normal life while my world crumbled around me. When Thomas came home that evening, he acted completely normal, asking about my day and helping KATHRYN with her homework, like he wasn't planning to rip our family apart. Tuesday brought another devastating discovery. I was cleaning out KATHRYN's backpack when I found a note from her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, asking to schedule a parent conference. The note mentioned some concerning things KATHRYN had been sharing at school and suggested we meet as soon as possible. When I called Mrs. Rodriguez, her voice was careful and professional, but I could hear the worry underneath. "Mrs. Patterson, KATHRYN has been showing me some videos on her tablet during free time. I think you and your husband should come in to discuss what she's been recording at home." My stomach dropped. What kind of videos? I'd rather discuss this in person, but KATHRYN seems to have captured some adult conversations that are concerning. She doesn't understand what she's recorded, but as a mandated reporter, I have some obligations I need to discuss with you. I scheduled the meeting for Thursday, not telling Thomas about it. I had a feeling whatever Mrs. Rodriguez had seen on KATHRYN's tablet might be the key to understanding what was really happening in my marriage. Wednesday was when Thomas made his boldest move yet. I came home from my shift at the hospital to find him in the kitchen with a woman I'd never seen before. She was tall and blonde, wearing a tight red dress that was completely inappropriate for a casual Wednesday evening. Thomas introduced her as Crystal, his business partner, who was helping him with some new investment opportunities. "Crystal's been advising me on some financial decisions," Thomas said smoothly, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. "I thought it was time you two met since we'll be working together more closely." Crystal smiled at me with perfect white teeth, but her eyes were cold and calculating. "Thomas has told me so much about you, Rebecca. He's mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately with work and everything." The audacity of it took my breath away. Thomas was bringing his mistress into our home, introducing her to me as a business partner, while simultaneously building a legal case to prove I was mentally unstable. It was so brazen, so cruel, that for a moment I couldn't even speak. "I should get dinner started," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "Oh, don't worry about that," Crystal said sweetly. "Thomas and I already ate. We had a long business meeting this afternoon." I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved and trusted for 8 years, and saw a stranger. He was watching me carefully, probably hoping I'd lose my temper and give him more ammunition for his custody case, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "That's fine," I said calmly. "I'll just make something for KATHRYN and myself." What none of us knew was that KATHRYN had been upstairs in her room, tablet in hand, recording herself giving a tour of her dollhouse for her imaginary YouTube channel. Her bedroom was directly above the kitchen, and the tablet's microphone was sensitive enough to pick up every word of the conversation happening below. Later that night, after Crystal had left and Thomas had gone to bed, I sat in KATHRYN's room watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, clutching her tablet even in her dreams. I had no idea that the device she loved so much contained hours of evidence that would soon change everything. The meeting with Mrs. Rodriguez was scheduled for the next day, and I had a feeling my world was about to change forever. Thursday's meeting with Mrs. Rodriguez felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. I sat in her classroom watching my daughter's teacher scroll through videos on KATHRYN's tablet, each one more devastating than the last. "Mrs. Patterson, KATHRYN has been showing me these during free time, thinking they're just family videos, Mrs. Rodriguez said carefully. "But the conversations in the background are deeply concerning. I've documented everything as a mandated reporter." She showed me video after video of Thomas's phone calls with Crystal, his discussions about framing me as mentally unstable, his plans to take KATHRYN away from me. My 7-year-old daughter had unknowingly built the perfect case against her own father. "I'm giving you copies of everything," Mrs. Rodriguez said, handing me a flash drive. "You need to protect yourself and KATHRYN. This man is dangerous." I spent the weekend before Thanksgiving meeting secretly with lawyers and planning my escape. But first, I wanted Thomas's family to see exactly who they'd been supporting. I wanted them to witness his true nature before I disappeared with KATHRYN forever. Thanksgiving Day arrived with the weight of finality. This would be the last time I'd sit at this table, the last time I'd pretend to be part of this family that had helped Thomas try to destroy me. The day unfolded exactly as I'd expected. Margaret's cruel comments about my cooking and appearance, Patricia's fake concern about my mental health, the entire family treating me like a fragile, unstable woman who couldn't be trusted with her own child. When Margaret made her pointed comment about some mothers not being cut out for responsibility, I'd finally had enough. I stood up for myself, and Thomas exploded with rage, slapping me hard across the face in front of everyone. The room fell silent. 23 people stared in shock, but I could see some weren't really surprised. Thomas had prepared them for this moment, told them I was unstable and prone to causing scenes. Then my brave little daughter stepped forward with her tablet. "Daddy, should I show everyone the videos?" KATHRYN asked in her clear, innocent voice. Thomas went completely white. His hands started shaking, and sweat beaded on his forehead. He knew exactly what his daughter had recorded. "What videos, sweetheart?" Margaret asked, but her voice was uncertain now. KATHRYN looked around the room with those big brown eyes. "The videos where Daddy talks to his girlfriend Crystal about leaving Mommy, and where he tells Crystal that Grandma and Aunt Patricia are helping him lie about Mommy being crazy so he can take me away." "That's enough," Thomas shouted, lunging toward KATHRYN to grab the tablet. but I stepped between them. "Don't you dare touch her." "KATHRYN, show them," I said firmly. My daughter's small fingers navigated to the video folder with the skill of a true digital native. She selected the most damaging recording and pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the dining room, crystal clear. "Crystal, my mother and sister have been perfect. They're documenting every little thing Rebecca does that seems off. Patricia even made up that story about Rebecca screaming at my mother on the phone. We're building the perfect case to prove she's mentally unstable." Margaret's face went ashen. Patricia dropped her fork with a clatter. KATHRYN scrolled to another video. Thomas's voice again. "The money thing is working perfectly. I've been making those withdrawals and then telling my family that Rebecca's been acting strange about finances. My accountant friend created fake records showing she's been spending recklessly. When I file for divorce, I'll have proof she's both mentally and financially irresponsible." "Thomas," Harold said quietly, speaking up for the first time all day. "What is this?" But KATHRYN wasn't finished. She found the video that would destroy Thomas completely. "This is the one where Daddy talks about his secret business," she said innocently, pressing play. Thomas's voice filled the room one final time. "Crystal, you have to understand, if Rebecca keeps digging, she might discover the construction company money laundering operation. I've been skimming from 3 different projects and funneling it through fake subcontractors. If she finds out about that, we're both going to prison. That's why she has to be discredited completely. It's not just about our relationship anymore, it's about survival." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas stood frozen, his face a mask of terror as he realized his daughter had recorded his confession to multiple felonies. Margaret slowly stood up, her face twisted with disgust. "Get out of my house!" "Mom, I can explain." "Get out!" she screamed. "You used us. You made us lie for you. You made us attack that poor girl while you were stealing money and cheating on her." Patricia was crying now, staring at her brother like she'd never seen him before. "Thomas, how could you do this to Rebecca? To KATHRYN?" Thomas looked around the room desperately, but every face showed the same expression: revulsion and betrayal. His perfect plan had crumbled because he never considered that his own daughter might be listening. "Rebecca," Harold said quietly, "I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We should have trusted you." I picked up KATHRYN and her tablet, holding my daughter close. "Thank you for finally seeing the truth, but we won't be coming back." As we walked toward the door, Thomas grabbed my arm. "Rebecca, wait. We can work this out. I can explain everything." I looked at this man who had tried to steal my child and destroy my life, and felt nothing but pity. "The police will be very interested in those videos, Thomas, especially the parts about money laundering." His grip loosened as the full weight of his situation hit him. He wasn't just losing his family, he was going to prison. KATHRYN and I walked out of that house and into our new life, free from Thomas's lies and manipulation. My daughter's innocent love of recording videos had saved us both and given us the evidence we needed to ensure Thomas could never hurt us again. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it takes a 7-year-old with a tablet to expose the monsters hiding in plain sight.